In the previous video, Dr. Tomlinson began an examination of what differentiated instructional strategies look like when applied to teaching reading and writing. In this video, Dr. Tomlinson will present more examples and introduce a video that illustrates how the connection between teacher and students results in lessons that are both engaging and effective. And now Dr. Tomlinson.
I want us to look for a couple of minutes at an example from a high school class that can serve a little bit, a middle school class that can serve a little bit as a wrap up and a look ahead. Not going to look at a whole lot of this, but this is a teacher who is in a middle school English class. And you're going to see just a few minutes from a 4-week unit. So there's a lot going on that we're not seeing here. But you also are going to see a number of things. So I'd like to ask you to look back again for how his learning environment feels, that mindset connections community thing. But also, what about the quality of his curriculum? In this class, you'll hear Rick say an interesting thing, and that is he plans first for his most advanced students, and then he tries to figure out how to differentiate to lift other students up there. When you do that, it sometimes has a way of lifting the whole class up so everybody looks pretty smart. And I want you to know that in Rick's class here, he does not have students that are mainstreamed for severe cognitive problems, but he does have students with learning disabilities and ADHD issues. He's got kids from 6 or 8 cultures, a couple of them English is fairly new for. He has students with learning disabilities, so there's a pretty good spread in here. And what that means is he has to teach for both skills and meaning. You're going to see the meaning-based part, and one thing that would be interesting to ask yourself is, what do you suppose he does with those kids who are learning English? How could he find extra time for them? Where would that work? And where might he do certain kinds of vocabulary work with different students who have different needs? How's he doing with engaging the kids and with understanding, because those are the 2 main criteria for curriculum. And then this pushes us ahead just a little bit. How is he using assessment that may be different than the way some of us use it in school? And what questions do you have? So Jason, we'll take a crack at Rick now and see how he's looking here.
Rick Wormley teaches middle school English in Herndon, Virginia. We'll gain a perspective on what a differentiated classroom looks like over time by visiting 4 class sessions occurring at various intervals during a unit spanning over a month of instruction. Rick's classroom reflects a complex curriculum because as he designs units, he first considers the more advanced students and then differentiates to help other students achieve those complex goals.
Welcome to our very first day of a brand new unit.
Good differentiation begins with good curriculum.
I think when you plan a differentiated unit, you start by planning a good unit, which means, among other things, that you really have to have clarity on why you want students to learn it. What is it that's essential about that topic in that subject? Do we really understand the essential ideas? Are we very clear on what the essential skills are? Do we understand how those help reveal the power of the subject to the student?
It underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly and compassionately with one another and to preserve and cherish that pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known. You guys recognize that, I'm sure, as Reflections on a Mote of Dust by Carl Sagan. And now, the last one. This is from Dudley Randall. It's on the bombing of the church in Birmingham, Alabama, 1963. Mother dear, may I go downtown?
The unit I'm doing right now is on writer's voice. That is the focus of the unit. The essential understandings of this unit on writer's voice are going to be: voice is the writer revealed. There are definite tools that writers use to generate that voice. Voice takes time to develop. It doesn't happen overnight. Good writers have strong voices. And my students are writers. Those 5.
What do all 4 of these writings have in common?
The first one showed someone who was just kind of writing about writing and they were annoyed. And so through their writing, they all kind of showed their personality.
Okay, show personality.
They all seem to show an emotion.
They're kind of opinionated, like they all had their different points of view on the topic.
Do you think that all these writers understood what they were talking about? Okay, so I'm going to put that one up there as a possibility.
As a result of this unit, I would like the kids to be able to write a strong piece in terms of voice, narrative or expository, but be able to apply the tools that we've learned to create that strong voice. Tools like manipulating the words or sentence structures or looking at attitude or tone or figurative language or getting a lot of knowledge about the topic. I also want them to be able to analyze another piece and determine the voice, to be able to describe it. Kind of a subtext of running through this is that they're early adolescent and they are developing and they're creating an identity for themselves. They're creating a voice for themselves. And so it transcends just the basic written page. It takes a lot of work. It's a lot of upfront work. Really seriously thinking about what is essential, what is enduring in this concept that I really want to communicate. What's nice to know? What ways can I enrich those who are already there? What ways can I remediate? And that there are multiple paths.
So what I'd like to do is I would like to divide you into these two groups, and I'm going to give each group an activity or two to do, and then we're going to come together at the end for a closure at the end of our time.
The first obligation of a teacher is always to make sure that high quality instruction is in place. Then the refinement is to say, now how can I teach this in ways that honor the various readiness levels of students in the class, that take into account their developed interest or developing interest, and that let them learn in ways that they prefer to learn best.
There are a lot of major ways that I might differentiate this unit. I have some kids who really understand writer's voice right now, right here, and they're ready to move ahead. I can give them one idea that has multiple tasks and concepts in it. There are others in that class who are going to need to be affirmed every step of the way, and I have to make the steps much smaller. So I'm imagining my differentiation will come from the sense of readiness of each child in terms of understanding it and being able to define it. A sense of readiness with each one of the tools.
Who thinks they have a writer's voice?
Once we divided into two groups, each group had its own set of tasks. With the group that was more introductory, I actually led a discussion, trying to see where everybody was in their thinking regarding writer's voice.
All right, Evan, what's your writer's voice?
It pretty much varies, but it's always just got a little part of me in there.
In the other group, I asked them to identify the specific tools that were used in each of the 4 reading pieces to create that writer's voice, and they did that on their own.
That there's a definite theme to the writing, whether it be portrayal was someone who has bad grammar.
The focus was to hook the students and introduce them to this new unit on writer's voice.
I think it's important to make sure that we have an invitation for students to study what we want to teach, so that when they look at it, they find it intriguing, and if we're lucky, even irresistible, so that there's an appeal, something that draws them into it.
The second task for each one of the groups was some application or play with writer's voice. With the introductory group, I asked them simply to choose any event.
Basketball game, or making a pizza, changing a baby's diaper, changing a tire, whatever you'd like.
And they had to choose 3 inanimate objects in that scene and do a very brief monologue from each object that expressed their attitude, their response to what was going on.
And I want you to tell me what those objects are thinking in their minds with full writer's voice and personality coming through. For instance,
they had to actually write what did they do to make each object come to life, what did they have to change between each one.
A lot of paper on the floor, or unorganized binder, messy floor.
The wheel is humble because nobody ever looks at the wheel.
And really cares about it.
So he's humble and he's okay with that.
Yeah.
The other group, because I think they were ready, they're ready to go beyond that. I wanted them to find a celebrity of some sort, somebody who had a definite personality. And I wanted them to write a narrative or a speech that was particularly well written just for them. It would sound like them if they said it.
Okay, you got somebody in your mind. Is anybody thinking of somebody right now in their mind? Who are you thinking of, Katie?
Will Smith.
Will Smith. Yeah. Anybody else?
And now the difference between those two is that one employed a lot more complexity. I wanted to increase all the variables that had to be accounted for. I didn't want to overwhelm the introductory group, and I wanted to really challenge that advanced group.
Continuously assessing where students are helps you to match appropriate activities to their needs.
Once a class has been together for a brief period of time, the teacher begins to develop a sense, for example, of the span of reading abilities or comprehension abilities, for things like attention span, for passions that students have for particular things, and for dislikes that students have. And so the teacher can make large, proactive, upfront plans for differentiation based just on a general sense of the class, and then can continue to refine plans by informal and formal assessment of students as the unit goes on. It's important for a teacher to pre-assess where students are as a unit begins. I think many of us maybe aren't taught to do that, but if we really understood what some students' learning gaps were, and if we understood that other students know as much as we plan to teach about the unit, it would give us some great clues on how we might adjust our teaching.
Well, I had to figure out where students were regarding those essential understandings for this particular unit. So I did a pre-assessment about 2 weeks ago. And the pre-assessment for this unit was 3 questions. First, what is writer's voice? They can define it any way they want. Second, give me an example of something that is written with strong writer's voice. And third, what is it that makes this a strong writer's voice? And I was shocked by some of the advanced thinking that was going on the part of this smaller group, this down the road group I call. They're really on their way. And the group that was more introductory, a lot of them wrote, I don't have a clue what you're talking about, Mr. Wormley. I'm going to need everything in this unit. But I have to tell you that these groups are really going to be flowing back and forth.
Now, what does that mean?
I go over to that group. Oh, when I wrote that thing, I didn't really know what it was about actually, but you seem to like my answer.
Guys,
I sort of get this, but I'm not quite sure if I
I want to push you beyond your comfort level, Thomas, because I've seen things this year that make me crack up about some of your writing. You are very, very clever. You have a very strong voice. In addition, what you wrote in the pre-assessment was pretty much right where you needed to be somebody who's showing this experience. So I'm going to say no. If you find, after a couple of lessons, that you still would like to move over there, I will let you go, okay? Take a chance.
I plan to use some scaffolding there to help that boy who was a little bit uncomfortable in that advanced group.
What do you think about the learning environment in Rick's classroom? Do the kids seem at home and engaged and able to work independently and appropriately challenged to you? You know, that's a funny thing. You see it, and it's like talking about the air in the room. It's sort of not visible, and yet it's really important. What do you think about you haven't seen very much yet, I'll grant you that, but how do you feel about the kids? Do they seem at ease and good to go and comfortable with each other?
Yes, I think they are. I think when he told them that they were breaking up into groups, I mean, you know, right away I took notice of how they just went to their group without fighting and screaming and arguing, which is an anomaly for us.
But they've been doing it all
right,
year
they've been
probably,
doing
and it's
it
consistent.
for a long time. Also, the room was very, I mean, it looked like very homey. It had a lot of their stuff on the walls.
One of the little features of that I like, and it took me a long time of seeing this to see it, but on one bulletin board he has a series of pictures of himself with his own children on the beach, with the kids standing on his shoulders and doing flips and stuff. And I've always thought that that must be a loud message to the kids, that when he's with his own children, you know, he does neat things with them and he's a cool dad and that sort of thing. And then a lot of their work in that graffiti wall, there's a good bit of stuff that sort of speaks of thoughtfulness and bringing the kids together. What do you think about connections with him? Again, you've seen only just the tiniest little piece, but do you see anything that suggests that the kids are comfortable with him, or, yeah?
Between Rick and Thomas, the kid who wanted to move groups, there was so much trust and openness to be able to have that conversation openly in front of everybody. And
that's a remarkable moment to me, and that's the piece I wanted to make sure that you saw, because just that little second to me tells a whole story, like that little piece with the high school class yesterday. For the kid to be able to say comfortably in front of his peers, I'm not sure if I can do this work, I'm not sure you made the right decision with me, and nobody's teasing him or hooting or anything. A couple of them are grinning a little bit, but they're kids, and nobody's rolling their eyes, and he doesn't seem embarrassed. And Rick doesn't seem to have any difficulty saying to him, let me tell you why I did this, and I kind of think I'm on the right track here, but let's give it a shot, and if it doesn't work, we can do something else, but I want you to work beyond your comfort zone, so let's try that. That speaks to me of an ongoing kind of conversation between that teacher and those kids, so that they feel free to talk to each other, and that they are also talking about how decisions are made in a classroom, and it's not just the teacher making them, and they have that conversation. That's a kind of a telling moment to me. How about engagement? Do you think the kids are fairly engaged so far? In other words, sticking with him, thinking? Looks pretty good to me here. I mean, the kids that are in the discussion group with him seem to be going with him and participating, and the kids in that smaller group are certainly keeping the thing going. How does he seem to be using assessment here? Again, you've seen just the teeniest little piece, but what's he doing with assessment that we don't all always do? Catch that? Yeah.
He was asking, getting the students' inputs on what it was they needed to be able to do that assignment, and then he was able to, and then he talked about the groups possibly being fluid to make sure that he's modifying that, what the instruction by the students needs, and if they need to go one to one group to another.
Yeah, you see at least two things there, even in that just really brief little section. One is, a week before the unit started, he gave the kids 3 questions to find out how much they know. Who can really define voice? And who can illustrate what voice means? And who can tell me how writers create voice? And that's very important on a couple of levels. What he found is, he says to you, is one group that can definitely define voice, and they can illustrate it all over the place, and they can talk about what writers do to make voice happen. And the teacher has to go, woo, that's what I was getting ready to teach for the next month. What do I do with those kids? And then, again, this speaks to me of their relationship. He said a number of kids in the more basic group just wrote on the thing, I don't have a clue what you're talking about, Mr. Wormley. Whatever it is you need to teach me, you better teach it to me, because I don't even know what you're talking about here. That pre-assessment does a couple of things. It lets him see where kids are relative to his goals before he starts. But it also helps them understand this is how he's making decisions about what we're going to do in the class. And if there's stuff I don't know, I'd better learn it. If there's stuff I do know, I better learn something else. And so those, it really helps him know where they are before the unit begins. First time I saw this video, I wanted to kick myself in the head. I always did pre-assessments, the night before the unit started. And then, of course, you have no time to think at home, to do anything. And why in the world it didn't occur to me you could give the pre-assessment a week in advance so you had 20 seconds to think about something, I don't know, but it was one of those, gee, you're stupid moments. But he gave it to the kids a week out so he can think and organize himself and see who's where. That's a pre-assessment piece. And then what you were talking about, he says the groups are going to keep moving, and as kids learn stuff, they'll move back and forth, and that's based on ongoing assessment that he'll be doing. What questions do you have? Things that you're not sure of, not sure you like, not quite sure why he was doing what he was doing, or things that you thought were interesting? Probably ought to have a couple of misgivings having just seen this little part. Anything bugging anybody?
I just have a comment. I thought it was very interesting that both groups were very aware of their placement and the kind of respect it takes to kind of know that I'm the remedial group, but I'm okay with that, and I'm the advanced group, and I'm okay with that. And it just made me think a little bit about how I need to connect with kids to make that environment happen and to make it successful.
really cool thing there is the way you said that. You know, it's so easy to watch something like this and think, well, my kids aren't like that and this can't happen where I am. I think it's a very cool thing to look and say, what can I do to move myself there? Because that's how we all grow. I think that's just a stellar comment. The first group is not a remedial group. They're just a group that don't know what it is he's supposed to teach. If they all knew what he was supposed to teach, then the whole curriculum would be a mismatch for the whole grade. He has a bunch of kids that need to know what he's planning to teach. It's not really remedial, it's just this is what we're supposed to learn, and if you don't have it, you need to get it, and then we'll move on. But yes, I think your point's important. Somehow with him, they have come to understand that there's a goal, and if you're there, you keep moving, and if you're not, you keep moving till you get to it, and then you keep moving, and they're okay with that notion of status in there. Part of that, I think, is because they understand what he's doing with assessment. In other words, my job is to make sure you succeed with these things. If you don't know it, that's why we're here, we'll learn it. If you do know it, we can keep you moving. As soon as you get it, we'll move on. I think they understand that, but I also think you're exactly right. Part of it is their trust of him, a relationship with him that leads to trust, and part of that is they're talking about this kind of thing. Other things that are interesting or concerning to you?
I, had the feeling that Herndon must be a very supportive school system to teach at. I've taught at the middle school level for many years, and I know that there were many English teachers who'd like to teach like that, and now they're putting in 125 kids, on their caseloads and expecting them to have restricted lesson plans and, follow a certain format that would go against that grain.
Yeah. Well, his student load is not a small one. I think he probably does have, that particular year probably had 130, 135, 140 kids, something like that. I mean, it's not a tiny load. The issue that you're talking about structured lesson plans, everybody do this together, is one I have to tell you, I hope we'll outgrow. I have no difficulty with somebody saying, look, here's a prototype. And if you're kind of floundering, this will sort of let you see what the stuff is, kind of in what order you might go. That might, and especially if they're really good, some of those are flat as a pancake and some of them are very interesting and enriched. If somebody gave me really good stuff to work from and then said, now go where you need to with your students, but here's a guide for you, I'm okay with that. But to follow this scripted thing just really flies in the face of all grades of middle school. That's the wackiest, most diverse group of kids in the world, changing by the day. So I think he is in a district that certainly does work with their teachers a lot. He's in Fairfax County, Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C., massively. It's the largest district in the state of Virginia, really large district. They do guidance. They make sure that the teachers have the materials and stuff, but I don't think they're at the point of saying everybody has to be on page 3 today. One question I thought somebody might ask, and I just want to pop it out because I want you to have this moment in your head. All you saw here was part of one class when Rick is differentiating based on student readiness. At other points in the next few minutes, he has the whole class sitting wherever, and he just says, turn to somebody and do so and so. So he's gone from readiness-based groups to random groups, just pick somebody you want to work with. And then at another point, he says, here are 4 topics or 3 topics you might want to write on. You might want to write about something from a moment in school, a moment in music, or sports. And the kids get up and find other people. If you want to write about sports, you get together. If you want to write about a moment in school, you get together. That's an interest-based task. And I think it's very important to understand that if you see a little bit of this, you'll see flexible grouping with the kids being grouped and regrouped in different ways so that it's whole class, pairs, tables full, based on interest, based on readiness, random kinds of things. And it means that you don't have bluebirds and buzzards again, you have many things happening, and there's just this sense of flowing back and forth. And that's one reason why the kids don't mind those two groups. Those are very temporary, and within a few minutes they're going to be gone, and something else is going to happen. And before they come back together again, they'll have been in 3 or 4 other different kinds of groups. So it's just one little piece of a fabric. It's not the way life is in there, it's just one piece.
In the next video, Dr. Tomlinson will look more closely at our diverse student population and explain how differentiated literacy instruction can be used to meet students' varying readiness levels, learning profiles, and personal interests.